Hello, I'm Corey Evans. I'm on the board of directors of the 143 TV station, Cohasset Community Television, and this is Cohasset Common. Today, I have joining us Tanya Bodell, who is the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee. Tanya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Corey. I'm so excited. This is great.
This is something I've been really wanting to do. Solar and alternative energy, protecting the planet is something that really gets a lot of people in town excited. And I wanted us to just have a moment to talk about where we are as a town and where we can go. And I think it's really exciting.
Perfect.
Great.
Let's do it. Let's do it. We are, by the way, our town is total demographic for being able to do progressive things with respect to clean energy, with respect to electric vehicles. We're likely to become one of those clusters. So the Alternative Energy Committee is really skating towards the puck, as they say in New England, and trying to move forward, knowing where we're going. And we've got a great team that are very involved in the energy industry. So
do you have any slots open on Alternative Energy Committee? Do you want to do a pitch for new volunteers?
So we're not open for business.
Okay,
fully for business. We're not open for new volunteers right now. We just got fully staffed.
Great.
We were thrilled with the interest from people who wanted to come on board. The Alternative Energy Committee, they are just so great. We have representatives from the energy industry. We have people who just represent interest in doing what's right for the environment. They are just wonderful people and they're so dedicated. And we're such an active committee that actually generates money for this town in the form of grants and savings. But there's also the love of the environment and protecting the environment behind it. So I'm just honored to be able to work with the members of the Alternative Energy Committee.
That's awesome. I think one thing that most people think about when they think about alternative energy is, alternative energy sources like solar panels in particular. I do know that the town, it was a big deal a few years ago, the town opened up the solar array on the landfill or the old landfill there. How's that doing?
Oh my gosh, what a success story. So that, as with any development project, did not come easy. We had originally put out a request for proposal in 2012 and ground wasn't struck until I think 2015, thanks to Palmer Capital. And the solar panels became operational on the landfill in 2017.
Okay, 3 years now. Yeah.
Years since they've been operational, those solar panels on the old landfill have generated almost $200,000 in savings to the town.
Amazing.
Amazing. And has produced basically 1.98 million kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's really decreased the carbon footprint for the world in our little town of Cohasset. And that's basically, I'm trying to mentally calculate how many, that's maybe around 200 homes, 200 annual electric bills for the homes. It's a lot that's been produced. So it's great.
I love, the idea of taking what is really an unusable piece of property. And it was, the landfill is not a small land area, and now turning it into not only something that, saving the planet, but also making us money. I think that's just a great, deployment of things. One question I've heard from people, and, I don't even understand it, is where does that power go when it's made?
The power is going to flow wherever it's going to flow. Think of the way a river flows downhill. Power flows according to the laws of physics. And so you don't direct it in any place unless you have it on your rooftop and feed it directly into your homes.
Okay.
Or put it at the schools and fed it directly into the schools. With the landfill, there's just not a lot of load at the DPW station. And so as a result, we put it directly into the National Grid distribution system.
Oh.
You've seen those brown wood poles on the side of the road
that are often knocked over. Yeah.
Right. So it just goes directly into that. But the way that the incentive works is if we put it into the system, National Grid has to buy it from us. And the price that they have to buy it from us at for the landfill is very high compared to what we're paying. So we're paying, and this is public, we're paying 8 cents a kilowatt hour for the solar energy from that site under contract with Palmer, 8 cents. And we're saving roughly 18 to 20 cents per
Right.
kilowatt. So that's a huge savings, much bigger than we anticipated when we moved ahead, but prices have gone up from where they were when we first did the RFP. So
So the
we've made some great savings.
so the energy, I mean, it produces a lot of energy, and that energy goes back into the wires that are going through all throughout town. It doesn't really just go to town hall. It's very possible that my house is getting some of that. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, no, it is. And so it's just going back into the system. But the other important thing about it is not who's using it. The more important thing is what doesn't have to fire up
Uh,
because the solar energy is being produced. So when the sun is shining, especially in the middle of summer, that's when New England is usually guzzling a bunch of natural gas on its generation portfolio. And so as a result, we're reducing the amount of natural gas that needs to be burned, sometimes oil that needs to be burned to be able to meet electric load. So that's where the true savings to the environment come from, is because instead of firing up a natural gas fired generator, we're able to use the solar power at our little old landfill in
that's
Cohasset to help the environment.
yeah. So that's just, I mean, that just speaks to what a great program or what a great idea this is. So I guess my next question is, can we add more? And where could we put it? I mean, I know we don't really have a secondary landfill. I know there are bigger landfills all over the place, but if we wanted to add more, and I know you're researching this, where are you looking?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the interesting things about these types of endeavors is you don't know until you ask the market. So when the town gave us permission to go out to bid in June at town meeting for the 6 town sites, the Alternative Energy Committee also expanded that and made it very clear to developers that we wanted not just bids for our 6 town sites that had been approved, but if there were other sites in town that might be useful, either owned by the town or even third-party sites
Hmm.
that are interested in that. And so with the request for a proposal, we received bids from 9 bidders, and they identified 16 different sites. The amount of energy that could be produced at those sites that were identified by the bidders was roughly 5 to 9 times what the town needs for its municipal load,
Okay, so not everybody, just for the town facilities.
just for the town facilities,
Okay.
5 to 9 times what the town facilities need, which is predominantly the schools and
Right.
the water and sewer. So as a result, we have this potential in town to build more solar at places that would otherwise not be fully utilized, and to be able to tap into that. And so the Alternative Energy Committee is first trying to move forward with the town sites and the town needs. And then we're really seriously thinking, what kind of community solar or other types of programs could we tap into to get solar built in town for the benefit of residents, or even for the benefit of other municipalities who want to be the off taker?
Where are the main, I mean, you said there are 16 places, but are there two or three that are really, really great ideas that you think would be a good fit?
Yeah, so in town, what we discovered was the small roofs like Wilcott Commons and the police and fire station. Unfortunately, I mean, they sort of cover their costs, but they don't create as much savings as we could get from, for example, carports at the schools. School roofs are great, but
What's a carport, if you
oh,
don't?
the carports. Okay,
Yeah.
so the carports would be, I'm sure people have seen these. They're basically carport covers. So they're solar panels on top of a cover, so you can park under them, and the snow stays off your car, the rain stays off your car, the sun stays off your car. So it's really good for parking because you protect your car, but you're not in a garage. You're just
Is it
under the
is it
roof.
any different than, I mean, I've heard the phrase, and I know the MBTA lots in Hingham have, I think they called it a solar canopy. Is that this?
Oh, same thing.
Okay.
Carports, canopies. Sorry, I'm using the same
No,
link.
that's fine. Yeah, just I've seen those at MBTA. I know that Cohasset, I think, is up to get a canopy eventually. But yeah, I'm coming from someone who's just a car geek. Selfishly, I love the idea of my car not getting snowed on, not being rained on when I'm opening my doors trying to get in, not being baked in the sun and getting to a 110-degree car and having your thighs get burned the second you sit in the car. And at the same time, it's taking what is just pavement and making money for us. I think that's, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's exciting.
Well, and what's exciting is the carports or canopies have traditionally been very expensive compared to roof. What we found with the bids that came in, there's more incentives for the car canopies or carports. And so as a result, they're not that much more expensive than
Right.
putting on roofs.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of parking space in town. We received bids for the town lot. There were bids for the schools, the school parking. We received bids for third-party site, like the swim center right outside of Wilcott
Oh
Commons.
yeah, that's a big parking lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great parking lot. And that could be used to help heat the swimming pool, as well as the pumps for the pool, as well as Wilcott Commons. We received bids for the parking lot at the Stop and Shop Plaza. And of course, the town itself could almost cover the rest of its load with the MBTA station alone.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's the carports are now a front runner in how we might want to proceed.
I don't know if you're a beer fan, but there's a very famous brewery up in Vermont, and they had just added solar canopies, so they're really proud to their parking lot, and it was actually quite beautiful. It had like an arc to it, looked great, and yeah, kept the cars out of the snow, but also they were very proud of the fact that their beer was all brewed using alternative energy. It was pretty cool.
It is very cool. And like I said, in the past, even couple years, we wouldn't have even thought about going forward with that because of the cost. You just
Right.
wouldn't get as much savings. But now with the way the incentives are structured and the way the costs have come down, it's really an economic option that could provide the town with a lot of savings.
What about you? We talked about carports. What about just some rooftops? I mean, you did mention that there were, some buildings in town maybe were a little too small to really work it, but are there buildings in town that have big enough roofs to make a difference?
So this is the town sites. This is our frustration, and we knew this going into the request for proposal. We just because of the age of the roofs, we are at that point where it's still a little bit too early to put the panels on because we know in the course of a 20-year contract, the roofs are going to have to be replaced. The school roofs, we got really competitive bids coming in for the school roofs. And I think the school committee implied that they'd be happy to have the panels on the school roof. The problem is every single bidder said you have to replace the roofs first.
Oh, okay.
We have now the new buildings. Palmer Capital offered up Stop and Shop Plaza. Don Stasco wrote a letter of support for this. And
Interesting.
something that would be a great opportunity. The new building that's going up, there's the roofs there. Abashan has the roofs. Graham Waste might be a third-party site.
So these would be private arrays that they put on. It would be an array that would go towards the town. Is that?
Yeah, so they could lease their roofs to Palmer to be able to put the solar panels on the roofs or in the parking lot, and the town would be the off-taker of that energy. And for purposes of the incentives to make it work, we'd have to take 100% of the energy off of that site. But you could have multiple sites in the same place. So we might take 100% of the rooftops, but somebody else could take 100% of the car canopies.
Right. So you mentioned cost a few times, and Palmer Capital has come up. So the two questions I'm left with are, how much money does this cost the town? And we are partnering with Palmer Capital. What service do they provide? How do they help us?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk about the cost. It costs the town nothing. In fact, better than nothing. We save money by moving forward with this. So we would effectively be paid to be the off-taker of the solar energy.
So how do we get this for free? How does this work? I don't understand.
So what happens is the developer comes in, they put all the money up front. We as a town have to commit to buying the energy from the site for the next 20 years. And once we sign that contract, the developer can take that to the bank to get the money to develop the solar panels.
Okay.
It's also better to team up with a developer right now because the federal and state incentives are tax credits. And so you need somebody who has tax appetite or somebody who pays taxes, and the town doesn't.
Correct.
So
Right.
we were asked early on, why doesn't the town just build them? And the answer is, well, the problem is the town doesn't get all of the incentives that's currently being offered on the federal and state level.
Interesting.
With a private party, they front all the money. They can do that because they have a signed contract. It's project-based financing, and they go ahead and build it. And all we have to do is buy the energy at the prescribed price going forward for the next 20 years. And that covers their cost of capital and the investment costs with the equipment and everything else that's required to install the solar energy array.
Is there any concern that the negotiated price, that we do now would go down so that we would be paying too much in the future, or is that something that really doesn't happen?
No, it can happen. And we at the Alternative Energy Committee and the Evaluation Committee are very concerned about that, because we do not want to be those guys or gals who entered into the contract that suddenly went upside down. There are some towns that entered in early that have some contracts that are just breaking even right now. But they got a lot of savings over the last 10 years by being an early adopter. We like to have what we call headroom. So in all of the bids, we specifically asked for a single price over the next 20 years. So we received a levelized price for the next 20 years. It's just single price, it's fixed.
Right, predictable.
It is possible that what happens is the credit we would receive could fall below the price that we're paying. You can try to mitigate that risk in a bunch of ways. And obviously the one way you can try to mitigate it is by entering into a contract only if there's enough headroom. Right now, the prices we're getting are about 10 to 25% below what we would get for a credit.
Okay.
So that gives us enough headroom. It's not as rich as our current contract at the old landfill.
Okay.
It does give us some headroom so that there's some ability for prices to go up and down. So that's one of the risks, but the way we're trying to mitigate that is by entering into a fixed price contract over the course of 20 years, and one that gives us enough headroom. We know we are going to be guaranteed savings, at least for the foreseeable future.
Got it. Solar panels, I mean, as we've talked about, I mean, they seem to work really well. I don't know too much about them, but I know the carbon, payback is super short. So if you're worried about carbon footprint, the only problem is then the sun goes down. So how can the town maximize the usefulness of these panels, on the times when the sun isn't up in the sky?
Yeah. So right now, the battery technology is really coming down in cost. And so there's a lot of energy storage options. The state requires, if we do move forward with a larger site, and larger defined as 500 kW or above, then the town would have to also have a battery installed. This was part of the utilities' concern that there was so much solar coming on without the batteries to help manage it, that it was wreaking havoc on their distribution systems. So if we do a big site, we would have to move forward with a battery on site per state law. A lot of the bidders are trying to keep the individual sites below that size threshold, because we're just trading off savings for the cost of the battery. At some point, the battery, for the most part, pays for itself, but there's still a hit to the potential savings to the town if we were to move forward with the battery. On the other hand, the battery provides, as you indicated, it provides some resiliency and reliability, and we can start using a battery solar combination for purposes of our backup power. So if the lights go out in town, which, as you know, happens frequently.
The school was, got knocked out the other day, and it really wreaked havoc. And I was surprised that we didn't have, sufficient backup power generation at the schools.
Yeah, and the schools do have backup power generation. In fact, the town alone, forget everybody's individual backup generators, which we'll talk about microgrids in a moment, but anybody who has a backup generator at their home has a microgrid at their home, or we call it a nanogrid because it's tiny.
Right.
The town itself has 13 backup generators.
That's a lot of generators. Yeah.
It's a lot of It's like, I don't want to say third world country, but this is not normal for the rest of the country.
And each one of them requires maintenance and, fuel and inefficiencies, and most of them are not that quiet. So, when I'm thinking about, batteries, we here in our house, I think about what is the money I'm not spending on a generator, instead.
That's exactly right. And when you're in a contract where you're buying the energy at a price that's much lower than what you would otherwise be paying for, and so some of those savings pay for the battery, you're now basically getting resiliency that pays for itself.
you just mentioned the word microgrids, and I've heard that thrown around a bit. Just what does that entail? Who gets the power? Just give me a quick overview of what that means.
Sure, sure. So microgrids are sort of this up and coming concept. It's been around for a while. But the thought is that instead of having a centralized generation with transmission and distribution that delivers energy to the end users can have their own on-site generation. So that's where backup generator would make any home that has a backup generator a nanogrid. You sort of create your own system for electricity. There's no wires associated with it, but it's delivered to your home.
So basically, if I lose my connection to the street and my connection to national grid, I still have power. And this a microgrid is maybe just a larger version of me just doing that on my own.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So that we'd call that a nanogrid. A microgrid would be, for example, school campuses or hospitals that have to have the backup power. Even our schools, our high school and Osgood and Deer Hill, they have backup generation. So we already have microgrids in town.
Oh.
Form of our school campuses. They're just
Right.
not called that. We call it
Okay.
backup generation because we live with it.
Right. Right. That's true. Right. Yeah.
So it's like everyday normal. Oh, yeah, whatever. So we have backup generators at the town. What we really don't have is a long-standing solution.
I mean, reliability, I think, is a huge concern. You know, when you have a diesel powered generator, it turns on, it's pretty good, and you kind of know what you're getting. How are batteries for reliability? How long do these last? Are there problems? Are there things we need to be worried about?
Yeah, so the battery technology has really improved. There's all sorts of different materials that can be used for the batteries. The batteries generally are sized up to a certain size, and then they can run a certain amount of hours at that maximum capacity. So if you have, for example, a 10 kilowatt battery and it can run for 4 hours, that would be considered a 40 kilowatt hour battery.
Okay.
At 10 kilowatts for 4 hours. So batteries tend to come in a 2 hour, 4 hour, 6 hour, and there are some storage solutions that are longer duration. But right now, the 2 hour and 4 hour tend to be the more competitive options.
How long will the batteries last in the years? Is it something that we'll have to be replacing every couple of years, or what's the timeline?
Yep. So the life of the battery really depends on how much it's charging and discharging.
Okay.
So it's really about the charging discharge. So if it's sitting as a backup and it's only being used when we need it, then it's going to have a longer life. I think the lifespan of batteries generally is now about 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
That's something to think about when you're looking at alternative storage options. On the other hand, the question is, how much are you using it?
Got it. And what about at the end of the battery's life? Recycling? Are these hard to get rid of? Are they expensive to get rid of?
There is a whole theory that we will have many opportunities for electric vehicle batteries and others for 25 cents on the dollar to be able to string those together and use those as backup going forward. So there's an expectation that there could be, even once they run their course, they just degrade, but it's a ongoing degradation. So you can still use the battery until the true end of life. That market hasn't been created yet because there's not enough batteries that are at that age of trading, but there's an expectation that there would be a secondary market. And then there's also, recycling. It's going to be a recycling policy has to look at that as a life cycle choice for batteries.
Sounds like something we have to definitely keep in mind when we make these decisions. Last thing, and you did mention electric cars, and that does seem to be the future of the automotive industry. I mean, I like big engine and stick shift, just as much as the next guy, but it seems like we're going that way. The town now has a bunch of charging locations, which just kind of, to me, popped up out of nowhere. I think it's great. How many do we have? Where are they? And are they ready to go?
Yeah, no, so this is exciting. So this year, the Alternative Energy Committee sort of looked up and said, oh my gosh, there's money out there for charging stations. Why don't we go get some of that? And so Michelle Leary, God love her, she went after that money with National Grid, and we suddenly were able to install at, pennies on the dollar. I mean, really a small portion of the total cost. We were able to, what we now have are 20 active ports,
20. Wow, that's
5
a lot.
different
Yeah.
locations.
Yeah. I remember when Boston opened up like 2 in front of City Hall, it was a big deal. And to think that Cohasset is 20, we're doing okay.
I know. So it's about 4 ports, 2 stations at each of the 5 locations, and I'll just name them off because right now they're available for residents of town to use. Town Hall, behind Town Hall, Town Parking Lot has 2 stations with 4 ports. The middle school, high school has 2 stations with 4 ports, I think right outside the business center. And then the recreation center has 2 stations with 4 ports, and the library has 2 stations with 4 ports. So 5 sites, all centrally located, and we're glad that we got that money because at this point, National Grid doesn't have any more to divvy out.
Oh,
So
we made it. Good.
we came in and made it. But we're so proud of those, and it's just a start because, as you said, electric vehicles, they're here, and we are the demographic in town. I mean, you've seen the Teslas driving around, the Leafs, the Priuses were driving around the very beginning. We are the demographic that would be the early adopters of electric vehicles, and they're now in the mass market. So we're expecting the town is going to have a lot of electric vehicles. We're also looking at how many we have and trying to figure out what that means with respect to our town's reliability.
So speaking of that, do you have any data? Are these being used already? Are they being utilized by residents in town?
Yeah, so until last month, it was primarily just the town vehicles. We have 3 electric vehicles in town, 1 for the senior center, 2 for town usage. And that's through the Green Communities Act. So they're basically subsidized. And until last month, it was primarily the town vehicles that were charging. And I think word of mouth is starting to get out because what we've started to see is an uptick on not just how much charging is happening at those sites, but also the number of unique vehicles. I think
You
there's
can
about
see both. That's great.
20 vehicles outside of the town's vehicles.
And these are open to anybody, not just town residents, correct?
Right now, they're open to anybody. They're charge point stations. So anybody who has a membership with ChargePoint, it shows up on their map. If you go online and look up ChargePoint stations, 3 of them pop up for the town.
Tanya, I want to say thank you so much for spending the time here on Cohasset Common to answer these questions. I'm personally very excited. If anyone has any questions, can they reach out and ask them to your committee? What's a good way to
Absolutely.
get in contact with
Absolutely.
you guys?
We would love that. And we tend to meet the 2nd Thursday of the month. Our agenda obviously are posted on the website. So if anybody would like to attend our meetings, we would love to have them. Also, we tend to post other interesting presentations that we've made or information tied to these issues and these topics on the Alternative Energy Committee portion of the town website. So check out our website, and we look forward to seeing everybody.
Okay, thanks again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Corey.